I feel like I should say thank you, because I do feel like you all have been doing that very strategically in ways that I hadn't even thought about. I think continuing to do that is very, very useful, and I didn't fully understand how useful before, but it's because the other side is very, very good at that. So I don't even know how to quantify the amount of time I feel I have wasted in my year and a half on this job responding to that kind of letter, complaint, call. And it doesn't even take, you know, like you might think there are a few very influential folks who can move, you know, whose criticism can actually get somebody's attention, but it doesn't actually take that. I think it's the strength with which a complaint is made, you know, the way it's wound up with all kinds of things about, you know, about the economy and the role of government. The other side is very well oiled in being able to do that. So I have found it is very helpful to have a counterweight, at least.
That's great. Dolores.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I think that all of us need to be partners with your organizations, and we know that there's a lot of Spanish literature that is out there. For instance, I know the Department of Labor did all of these ads in Spanish, and television ads and radio ads telling people that they're covered, and regardless of their status, they don't have to be citizens or residents. If there's something that happens on the workplace, it's a safety violation or a wage violation, that they can report it. And a lot of workers don't know that they don't have to give their name. It can be anonymous, right? And so I think that all of the community organizations can be partners. I mean, we do community organizing. The other thing that we have done is we have invited the labor commissioner to come to our general meetings. We have anywhere from 70 to 100 people to come and to tell them what their rights are. And so once they know what their rights are, then that really helps them. The other thing is that I think it would be really great if, because sometimes workers are confused. They don't know whether it's a violation because they're organizing, which should probably go to the Agricultural Labor Relations Board, or whether it's a wage violation or a safety violation. And maybe if somehow up there they could put a little brochure out in English and Spanish telling workers, okay, if this happens, this is the agency that you report to, you know? And so I think a lot more has to be done, but I think that all of us should kind of consider ourselves partners so that we can help you with the work that you do, because we're the ones that are out there with the workers. We know what's happening to them, and you know, we can be a lot more helpful, I think, than what we're doing right now. My organization is the Dolores Huerta Foundation for Community Organizing, and so we're in touch with workers in 7 different agricultural communities, both in Tulare County. Oh, one other thing, OSHA put out these great handkerchiefs that had the phone number on them, and we distributed these during a Cinco de Mayo parade, and we gave them out to all of the people. This was in Tulare County in Woodlake, and we gave them out to all the people that were there looking at the parade. So this is a scarf that has the OSHA number on it that they can call if there's a worker violation. It was really cool.
That's great.
So I obviously, I think that's a terrific point. And one thing that I want to share is that we actually have a joint project right now to do statewide outreach. And we're tapping money from PAGA funds, actually, which have been unused for, you know, by the state for worker education or any kind of education for the, you know, better part of the last many years. And we're going to be doing actually concerted education, and I think that'll be another area of concrete collaboration, because folks like us have been thinking about how do you reach folks in a way that, you know, makes sense, that's understandable for decades. And so instead of just having people create it from scratch, right, people who aren't used to doing that, adopting materials that have already been used and just using the state's ability to disseminate it would I think, be really helpful. You know, one other thing I want to say about this outreach and education is I feel like, you know, so right now the DLSC has our complaint form translated in more languages than it's ever been translated before. And we're doing everything in at least Spanish and English. So we're translating a whole, more forms and more outreach materials. But all of those things also have costs that can be sometimes prohibitive. I know we all know that because that's a challenge that we face in our organizations. So that's an area I think of concrete assistance. When I say, you know, think about the resources that you bring and whether there could be a concrete collaboration. I know we're working with Betty and with Victor on several projects. Again, I just would ask maybe after this meeting if we could think about that, I think that would be really, really useful, because just translation is one area where the state could obviously do much better, and with the resources we have, it'd be helpful to have partners.
Excellent, great. So we have time probably for 2 more questions. Julie has graciously said she could stay a few minutes. Cynthia. Oh, Bruce, you've got the mic? Okay, then Cynthia, you've got the last one.
Thanks. I'm curious whether you have found in your agencies that there are some employers who actually are willing to cooperate actively and honestly with you to enforce labor laws. You know, the law's preamble always says, you know, these laws are not just to protect workers, they're to protect law-abiding employers. You made that point before. We always say that. It's a good thing, right, to enforce the laws for the benefit of the employer, not to be undermined. And working with the United Farm Workers here in California, we've bumped on immigration, on corporate social responsibility. We actually have found a few employers that actually seem to believe that it's a good thing to enforce basic laws. But when it comes to their trade associations, they tend to go down to the lowest common denominator. So publicly, they tend not to want to step up and say, oh yeah, I believe in this stuff, I'm supportive of your mission, and they go back to the lowest common denominator, which is you're a bunch of thugs using government money and our tax dollars to come after us and ruin business. So I'm wondering what your experience is.
I just have one anecdote. So I made a speech to a group of employers and employer attorneys about misclassification and why we're cracking down on it, why it's bad for everybody when some misclassify, and how some industries have been decimated by misclassification by a few major actors, right? So you should all be invested in it. And afterwards, an employer basically contacted me to say, thank you for telling me how to do, I realize I've been misclassifying, so now I'm gonna hire them all back as employees. So my office went back to talk to them to say, oh, can you actually share your story? Because that's very helpful. That's exactly the kind of message that we need to have. And her response was, no, I don't think, and I think that would be very damaging for me in my business. So that's not a direct answer. I'm just echoing what you said.
Great. Cynthia.
Yes, this has been a really great day, and obviously it's very exciting to have Ellen and Julie here. There are a lot of advocates, lawyer-type advocates in the audience as well, and I think there's been a lot of really positive and very informative discussion about how we can get communication out about workers' rights, how we can look at organizing issues, and I'm wondering if the two of you have a particular perspective about how litigation advocacy at the individual agency level could be addressed by the various advocacy groups in the audience here today in a way that will harmonize what you guys are doing. Is it joint employer? Is it workforce-wide litigation? Is it retaliation? And have you gotten some perspectives about that, and what will be the best way that we can use our resources to complement that?
I guess there are so many ways to approach and answer that. I'm trying to figure out how to prioritize the answer. I mean, I do think on the issue of harmonizing. I mean, I think that at some point there ought to be, and I said I wouldn't talk about new legislation because I do think that if we could enforce what's on the books already, we'd be a long way toward the world we want to be in. But I do think that from the legislative standpoint, I think it would be incredibly exciting to think about, right, a comprehensive labor bill that would address many of the issues in terms of how the economy has changed, everything that everybody's already talked about, but the laws were too slow to keep up with, or the corporations who benefit were too clever and worked their way around them. And I think there are a lot of components to that, some of which I know we've all talked about. I mean, I do think the retaliation laws are too weak, and I think that the remedies are almost ineffectual, and that's not just a problem with our investigations, which I can work to fix, but it's a problem with what we need in the law. So I think some sort of comprehensive look at because I feel like what we've learned to do legislatively is what we could accomplish based on who was there, and so the step back comprehensive look at what we actually really want. I mean, I've joked about with Mark, like every idea he's ever had in his head that he's tabled for 20 years, because it would never go anywhere, I feel like we need to put those back, you know, on the front burner. I guess really from the agency change standpoint, I think that what I said earlier in answer to Kevin, in terms of changing the culture and changing the way our community is viewed by the agency, can go a long way in longer term change, right? It won't matter as much who's in the labor commissioner seat if throughout the agency there's a sense that working with advocates out in the field actually benefits the agency, right? That's a harder thing to break down through policy if that's something that's well established by the time we're gone from the jobs. And so I feel like we're already doing that, but I feel like it's worth repeating that kind of, you know, communication and, you know, the giving the leads and collaborating and helping us to do in-depth investigations and helping to make, you know, breaking the law actually a very costly endeavor. I think that there's a lot that we could do there by just having collaboration on the ground. And we've talked about this already, but one step in that direction would be to do what we've said, like these open houses between my offices and advocates, so that people are actually coming into the office and talking about, you know, what we've done in common, sharing some of the successes that result from our collaborations, and a lot of the things that, again, the brilliant people in this room have tried to fight for in the past that you no longer have to fight for, we can actually establish in our offices, right? I mean, you know, clinics where organizations are helping workers to fill out the claim form. We changed the claim form completely to make it more logical, to make it make more sense. And it's a training process internally, but it's also a training process for workers on how to fill it out. And so having help doing that, I feel like, you know, integrating more of the groups with what we do internally, I feel like there's a tremendous opportunity for that we should not squander in the next couple of years.
Great. Thank you, Julie. Did you?
And yeah, I think that I'd add the expertise of lots of folks here in terms of legal strategies of, you know, I learned a lot and have always learned a lot in my life working with men, you know, with you about, you know, ways to interpret, ways to really use what we've got, you know, be it joint employer, you know, laws or misclassification or whatever. I think that is very valuable. I think the, you know, kind of the legal theories and to help our attorneys, you know as much as possible. We have many cases, you know, where our staff is, you know, facing very high-powered attorneys. We don't have the private bar coming in for health and safety like we do for wage and hour. And I think it really puts worker health and safety, you know, in a much more precarious position. We don't have many attorneys. I think a case like the Harris case on joint employer liability, in the Schwarzenegger administration, that fell. Arguments by WorkSafe and other worker health and safety advocates that should have carried the day about joint employer, multi-employer status, didn't, and that, you know, that case then was fought and won by the advocates. We now take a very different look at it, but I would really want to have the wide open doors to talk about that. If there are cases we should take up on writ, there's Jora from WorkSafe, which was responsible for Harris, but I think that there are, again, we're in a different position because we have a far better appeals board now than we ever did. We can take cases up, but just, you know, I think the opportunities to find violations, for example, a CRLA, you know, sends us information about violations, which helps us. I think we could replicate that with in other industries. So I think there are, again, so many possibilities for this really valuable, you know, partnerships and taking advantage now of what you know that we can't possibly know as well, you know, in a particular industry, or theories of, you know, enforcement that we could benefit from, that would give us a little added punch, or amicus briefs, or party status in cases. You know, I think that's, again, would be very, very welcome. And, but, also to just rejuvenate us in terms of, theories and approaches that we could be pursuing.